when you own this many businesses, when you've got so much going on, it's not always going to go right. I might have a bunch of things set, and then I just tell my clients, like, hey, listen, I'm sorry, I'm human. I'm not going to be able to do this today. And certain people hate that. But for me, it just allows me to kind of always know what's most important that day. And sometimes it's not working at all. And with that, I sort of start every day and I assess what's a plastic ball and what's a glass ball. And that's a really weird concept, but we're all juggling things, whether or not you're juggling your family or I'm juggling mine. I used to like stress about everything.
Sure.
And now I'm like, is that a glass or a plastic ball?
Right.
And having that kind of quick realization when you're panicking about what I'm doing every day really helps.
All right, everyone, welcome back to Focus to Win. Today's guest is someone who truly blends head and heart, everything she does. Diana Kahn is a powerhouse attorney, real estate broker, and multi-business owner based in Maryland. She's the founder of DK Law Group, where she brings over 15 years of experience in estate planning, real estate, and business law. And if you ask her what drives her, it's simple. Helping people protect their assets and building something that lasts.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. But beyond that, the impressive resume, Diana is also a mentor, community leader, and someone who deeply is committed to making a legal experience more human. Her approach is easy to understand, transparent, and built on real relationships. And today, we're diving into how she has built her business with intention, the legal blind spots that many real estate entrepreneurs miss, and why estate planning is actually one of the smartest moves you can make early in your journey. Diana is so excited. We're so excited to have you on the podcast today. So welcome.
I'm so excited to be here. I was a little late, but you've forgiven me, right?
Yeah, all good.
Okay,
all good.
great.
So let's talk about a little bit about the legal end of things and where people have their mishaps.
Sure.
So starting from the beginning, if you're a new investor, let's start there. As like, what does that look like for you?
So it's so difficult because I was in this boat myself before I got what I call big in my world. You just you chase the thing, right? Whatever it is, whether or not it's, your first property or you want to have your first kid, you're just sort of living life. And then you blink and you're so big and you're like, well, now I have this, essentially you look behind you and there's this all these little spots of financial issues or businesses you didn't build. I think one of the reasons I got so passionate about helping people is because secretly the IRS wanted to go after me.
Nice.
Because I got so big so quickly that I looked behind me and I had a couple years of taxes not done right. Liability pitfalls everywhere. And I always tell people now, when you start, do it now. Do it in under $1,000 with a lawyer who is just going to charge you the basics rather than wait till you get big. And
Right.
that's a huge fallout for most of my investors.
Yeah. Well, people always say they're going to give once they make more money and so forth. But if they don't
Right.
give when it's small, they're not going to give when it's big.
Well, it's a trajectory, right? I don't know if it was for you, but for me, it was I was kind of stagnant for a while. And then next thing you know, 1 year, I just, boom. You're sort of in this stage, you're like, I don't need a lawyer. I don't need to spend all this. And then when you kind of have this uptick, you're like, whoa, how did I get here? And 95% of my clients who come in when they waited too long are paying me almost triple or 4 times the amount because now they're in trouble.
Right. It's too late.
Yeah.
Rather than getting ahead of it. So I think one of the messaging then would just be pre-planning, get ahead of it when it's small, whether you're creating LLC, because I think of it like first-time home investor, right? A lot of time they have to get the property in their own name because they haven't done for mortgage purposes. They
Right.
don't have enough cash and so forth. So what do you recommend in a case like that?
So I always say start with an LLC. So I have 100 rental properties myself.
Okay.
And when you think about 100 rental properties, most lawyers say one LLC to one property. That's not going to work. If you're in the investment world, that's not realistic. So I always tell people, make sure your personal assets are separate from anything you've got going on for your LLCs or your businesses. And then look at equity or your values and have 1 or 2 LLCs, maybe 3, but align them in a way that works for you. So if you're doing fix and flips, which a lot of, I think, realtors do, a lot of people do, for fix and flips, open an LLC, fix it, flip it, close LLC.
Huh.
And I'll tell you really quickly why, because it's scary. I think I've had 3 clients just in the last couple of months call me. Let's say you do a fix and flip, and it's the same LLC that you've kept for 4 years. Most people think, I'm good. Statute of limitation is 3 years from the time somebody discovers an issue. not from the time you sell the property.
Yeah.
So I have one client right now where he's fixed and flipped over 100 properties. In the last 2 months, he's gotten hit with 3 lawsuits at $400,000 each. And they're properties he did like a long time ago. And he's got all of his nest egg in that same LLC. And he's like, what do I do? And I'm like, well, we're never going to do that again.
Yeah. Well, I think like I'm always protective. I built a name for myself. And when I rehab a house, I make sure I pull permits. I use licensed contractors and all those things. So I was like, do some of the things ahead of time to protect yourself as well. So I think of using that type of thing as well.
Yeah. So again, I do a lot of consults.
Sure.
And there's a few names
Sure.
where it's the same thing as in real estate. There's a few names, you see them and you're like, ugh, I don't really want to be on that transaction.
Sure. Yeah.
There's a few contractors, especially in Hartford County, I see their name and the consult doesn't even have to keep going. I was like, they didn't pull permits. And they're like, how do you know? And I'm like, they didn't pull permits. Like, your issue is valid. Let's talk about what's next steps. And they're like, how do you know that? And I'm like, I've heard their name at least 100 times.
Yeah. Especially when you're doing, it's a small world sometimes, right?
Yeah, so, exactly.
So you built multiple businesses in law and real estate. What was the moment you knew you weren't just an attorney, but an entrepreneur?
I think it's when I realized that I was a realtor first, and then I went to law school. I did short sale negotiations, and I kind of had this realization that if I'm working for other people and I'm kind of following the standard norm, I'm going to work 9 to 5. And then when I'm 60, I'm going to retire and either be broke like my parents or just have nothing to like be comfortable with. So I think looking at that, I was like, well, how can I do what I'm passionate about, but not be chasing money in what I'm passionate about?
Okay.
And I'm really excited and passionate about law. But if I'm billing $700 an hour, there's only a few people I can help that can afford that price range.
Certainly.
And so when I started my law firm, I was like, well, let me not do real estate law, which is what I'm excited about. Let me do all these other things. And then I started all these other companies. I started growing passive income. And now my law firm is great because I can sort of take on business pro bono if I'm passionate about a project, or I can help people and not just rely on that.
Bill. Yeah.
And
or overly bill.
Right. And the goal is really to retire by the age of 50, which is where my investment properties come in.
So what are you going to do if you retire at 50?
Probably still work because I'm addicted, but I'll be retired and doing it. So
well, financial freedom, I think sometimes it comes back to why, right? What we do and why, and when you dig deep enough, it usually comes back. One of the books I was reading, Success Habits, and it was like when you dig deep, Millionaire Success Habits, actually by Dean Graziosi. He's like, you have to dig to level 7, and then you really find out what that one word is. And usually a lot of time it's a freedom or something, but a lot of time it comes back to our childhood. So I just think of, all right, somebody had said to me, will you retire? And I'm like, probably not. I'll work less, or I'll be more choosy on what I'm doing with my time, but I'm also going to enjoy my time now too.
Right.
Like, I'm not getting any younger. I see so many people in their 50s that are passing away and younger that, all right, we want to make sure we're enjoying life. And I think that's part of the journey, is like, make sure you enjoy it along the way.
100%.
I'm sure you work more than 9 to 5. So
you know that.
Yeah, exactly. So
we've talked at like 9 o'clock at night, right?
Oh yeah, exactly. That's what I was saying. So when you said about the 9 to 5, I'm like, what is that? So it's not really 9 to 5. But that's the great thing of working for yourself. Right.
So for me, I have young kids, and if you look at my calendar, it's jam packed. I don't stop. I start at like 7:30 in the morning and I go till 10 o'clock at night. But between 4 to 7, there's nothing on my calendar every single day.
There is something on your calendar.
It's my kids.
Exactly.
So my staff know, don't book anything without permission. Do I sometimes stay late because I have situations that come up? Absolutely. But that's a time frame that for me, I only have 3 hours with my kids that they come home from school. I'm going to turn off for those 3 hours. And I think when you are chasing entrepreneurship or you're chasing this ability to do that, being in touch with those values is huge. And that's one of the reasons.
Wheel of life, right?
Right.
There's so many things in it. It's not just work. It's not just family. You got spirituality. You got health, wealth, all of those things in it. And I remember when I was so out of balance, I'm like, I could never spin this wheel because it was just so oblonged and so forth. But the more you figure life out a little bit more, which is figuring your business out, you're working more than a 9 to 5, you're working, having longer days, but you also can do what you want because you have flexibility more than anything else. And I think that's one of the things that comes out of either entrepreneurship, or even if you work for somebody and be an entrepreneur, that you're working for someone, you still have your after that 5 to 10, and you're still figuring out what you can cram in a day. Or it starts early in the morning. You could do stuff, I'm at 4:30 in the morning. I get all my stuff done that I need to get done early in the morning. And then I'm in here by, 8:45 or so.
It works.
Yeah, you make life work around it rather than just, I think so many people like, 9 to 5. I'm like, success. I think of, when you were building your business, you were probably, and you didn't have kids, you're probably working a lot longer day. Probably a 12 to 16, 18-hour day.
Yeah, and it's also like, my kids know. They know I work hard. So the other day, my kids couldn't go to school, and it was literally, we were running late to drop them off, and I had to be somewhere at 9 a.m. for a speaking engagement, and I had to be somewhere at 1 o'clock for a trial, and they were late, and I just looked at it, and I was like, you know what? You guys are going with me today. And they were like, really? And I'm like, you guys get to see me speak. You get to see me, go to trial. And at the end of the day, I asked them, what did you learn today? And they learned a lot more than going to school.
Yeah.
But they also know that it's not, I'm trying to juggle things. And I always tell them, I'm human, you're human. Like, it is what it is. Just always be in line with the values. And I think a lot of people who are chasing success don't stay in line with those values.
Core values are so important.
Yeah.
And if you don't figure them out earlier, you end up letting money control you.
Yep.
And I always say, if you're trying to figure out a decision, take money out of the equation and you'll make the right decision.
100%.
So many people do not do that.
And it's like, for me, I juggle so many horrible situations, life clients and all that. It's like 90% of my time where I'm not sleeping is the 10% of clients I knew I shouldn't have taken on for whatever reason, whether or not it was financial, personality, maybe I just didn't feel comfortable with that case or client. If 90% of our life is kind of based around those 10% of things you shouldn't be doing, then you need to focus on, like, why do I feel that way? And people sit with this feeling of, well, I just didn't like the person. I'm like, no, but like, why? What was it about it? And people don't dig deep for that.
The other thing that usually you probably get a gut feeling, and the mind and the gut were connected as an embryo. But a lot of time we get that gut feeling and we're like, oh no, it's going to be okay. And I'm like, no, trust your gut.
Right.
You really do. And when you do, you have a much better outcome. Like, I'm choosing not to work with that client.
Right.
And it's okay to say no.
Yeah. And sometimes, people are like, well, I just want to help. And I'm like, yeah, but at what expense? You're going to do a lot more if you help yourself first, or you're in line with that.
Yeah. So it kind of goes in my next question. You talk about growing your companies with intention. What does that actually look like in practice when you're wearing so many hats?
So my 2 words for my business are really weird. The first one's triage, which people are like, you're not a doctor. Why are you triaging like an ER? And I'm like, nothing. When you own this many businesses, when you've got so much going on, it's not always going to go right. And so I triage every single day. I might have a bunch of things set, and then I just tell my clients, like, hey, listen, I'm sorry, I'm human. I'm not going to be able to do this today. And certain people hate that. But for me, it just allows me to kind of always know what's most important that day. And sometimes it's not working at all if there's like a life situation. And then pivot, right? Like pivot everything you're doing and just expect to pivot. And those 2 things lead to a huge success. And with that, I sort of start every day and I assess what's a plastic ball and what's a glass ball. And that's a really weird concept, but we're all juggling things. Whether or not you're juggling your family or I'm juggling mine, everything's a glass or a plastic ball. And I used to, especially when I first had my first kid, I had postpartum depression and I wanted to be perfect mom. No one's a perfect mom. I used to like stress about everything.
Sure.
And now I'm like, you know what? They ate dinner tonight. Did they eat McDonald's? Yes. Is that a glass or a plastic ball?
Right.
And having that kind of quick realization when you're panicking about what I'm doing every day really helps. So I do that glass or plastic every day.
So what do you consider a glass ball then? What is that like? So what does that mean?
It depends on the day, but like, of course, for me, my kids have to be happy. They have to be fed. They have to be good. For Halloween, for example, I got really busy, did not get my 3-year-old a Halloween costume. Yeah. And I got really upset at myself. I didn't get upset about the Halloween costume. I got upset because I've been preoccupied with work. Right. And I was feeling that guilt. And it took a few seconds of me just feeling horrible And I was like, you know what? Glass or plastic.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, I'm here. It's Halloween evening. I took the day off.
Yeah.
I can't do what I did. So I made her paper. I made her a piece of paper, literally took a piece of paper, put it on her. And I just like, you know, we did a headband. It said paper. And you know what? She got the most compliments that evening. So
yeah.
Glass or plastic, just evaluate.
Well, that and improvise, right?
Right.
What's one lesson that has reshaped how you lead and or run your businesses today?
So a couple years ago, my mom got really sick. And before that, I used to talk a lot about money and not as much about values. And, you know, she was great. Woke up, she was in the ICU. And they said, say your goodbyes. It happened overnight. She was really young. Thankfully, she is living. She beat every single odd. But I had to give up my life overnight for 6 months. And I had like really young kids and there was a lot going on. She was on life support. It just, it happened overnight, but it really reshaped who I am. And it kind of made me realize how much grief and life kind of works different, because when we're chasing money or we're chasing entrepreneurship, we don't really realize how quickly things can change overnight. So now I'm more intentional with everything I do because I went through those 6 months. And it taught me grace. It taught me about reevaluating life. It also taught me to be human. And I think we're all those things all the time, but having her go through that, and also she went through it, but so did my family, so did my husband, so did my kids, so did my dad. Like, everybody was impacted. And some of our family members didn't come out unscathed. You know, like they couldn't touch base with themselves. Whereas with me, I really changed the way I did things.
How's she doing?
You know, the joke that I say, and it's, if you don't know my mom really well, it seems like an insensitive joke, but she had less than 1% chance of life. And I'm pretty sure nobody upstairs or downstairs were ready for her yet, because she beat every single odd. So she's living at home, able to walk by herself, which they told us she would never walk again. She got necrotizing fasciitis, which is a flesh-eating, skin-eating bacteria. She went on vacation. It got in the water. It was during the height of COVID. So when she came home, we thought it was COVID. So she didn't act on it for 4 or 5 days because we thought she had COVID. So by that time, it had spread throughout her entire leg. We got her at a hospital when she was in septic shock. Hospital said she's going to die. A 30-year-old fellow at the hospital told me that he believed the hospital was making a mistake and told us to get her into shock trauma. And I went up to that doctor later because in her chart, it said that he didn't agree with these doctors that were much older than him. And against medical advice, we got her into shock trauma, and that saved her life.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad she's doing much better. So, and she's alive.
She's alive. She's got a leg. She can walk. Like, it was, you know, there's her story, but then there's also this whole story of life that you just...
Well, you realize how valuable it is.
Yeah, I'm kind of glad I experienced it at a younger age because it really restructured the way business is. And now, you know, when people call me with like something they're really upset about, I always used to kind of jump and act and react. And now I tell clients, like, the first thing I say to them is like, listen, this is your life. I'm representing you in this issue. You're going to be hyper obsessed about it. But I'm going to tell you right now, I've seen 100 people like you. And if I'm not stressed, you shouldn't be stressed. Yeah. And, you know, just remember, this is a very small portion. You're not going to be remembering it in a year from now. We'll get through it.
Experience, that's where that comes into play. And life experiences too. When you're talking about stuff with your moms, like, gives you much better perspective on life. And you can give them better perspective to give them the therapy they need to hear sometimes, right? You know, real estate, we're always therapists as well. So I can only imagine on the legal side of things. Well,
you know, we had that one client in common, you and I, and it was an investor. It was their first investment deal. You and I both have experience with investments, and we just knew he got a rough end of the deal. Like, it was just a horrible situation for somebody who was losing a lot of money.
Right.
If you and I had gone through it, you know, it's been years of us going through it. It would have just been another thing. But that particular individual, I think, is going to be...
Yeah, and it sucks to go through it on your first one, on like your first rental property, and then you find a tenant that doesn't pay, and then all these other issues that come along with it, and months to get out of it. So, and, you know, how we had ones, I've had tenants that go in and tear up a house, you know, $40,000, $50,000 a remodel, and good luck getting it from them because they, you know, that's the bad experiences. Thankfully, you get the ones that have been in houses in 10 and 12 years and pay on time and have great credit scores. And that's what keeps us buying investment properties, not the ones that tear it up. But you get a bad one in the beginning. But again, it gives perspective. It's just a matter of where you're at in the game too.
Right. And for that person that we helped, I don't know where he's going to end up.
Yeah.
But I often think about people like that as like, maybe he won't end up doing any more investments. And that's really his own journey. But that comes in line a lot with just kind of leading with intention and having firms that focus more on the human side of it. Because I can help somebody get a divorce and other lawyers are like, you just have 5 houses together. It's just about property. Whereas I'll tell a woman, well, maybe a divorce isn't your best option. And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, you have a child that's 3 or 4.
It's a long road.
It's a long road. He's going to be in your life for 18 years. Is right now the time you want to do it? And they get silent. They're like, are you seriously telling me that right now? And I'm like, I'm not telling you don't get a divorce, but like
perspective.
There's a lot of stuff we need to think about that are just outside the merits of what your legal issue might be.
Right. I had a kid at 16 and I was definitely not getting married at that age. We were broke up before we even had them, and just gives you a lot of perspective on life and a lot of dealing with BS for 20 years. So I don't, if you can, the grass is not always greener. So before you go jump into the greener grass, make sure you look really good before you leap. So
at 16, really?
Yeah.
I'm gonna get some notes on that later.
Yeah. So I was like, makes you grow up really quick, and I don't have gray hair for a reason. It's like multiple reasons. So, what's one of the hardest lessons that's reshaped you, leading you into the business? Like,
I think it's, I started with short sales. I don't know if you remember that back then, but I was 21. I started doing short sale negotiations. I worked for 2 people, and I gave up my life for that company. And we went from 80 short sales to 8,000.
Wow.
The state of Maryland came knocking, and they were like, we think you're doing something wrong. They ordered a cease and desist. And eventually they retracted all of it. We changed short sale laws in the state of Maryland. But for me, it was really difficult because I had poured my life into it. And then I realized I don't own the company.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And all of a sudden I was just right back on the chopping block with everybody else. And then that kind of gave me a lot of perception of the things I give up versus the things I gain. So I'm a lot more intentional with knowing the outcomes and best and worst case outcomes, and learning from my mistakes and knowing that if I don't ask those questions now, if I don't have the hard conversations, it'll be worse later.
Sure.
So now I lean into hard conversations.
Again, experience.
Yeah.
So it's amazing what life will give you. So you're juggling work, family, and community. What's something people don't know behind the scenes that makes that possible? I
have a spouse who is incredible. He actually runs all of our businesses with us. So he does the property management side and the construction side.
Nice.
And what other people don't realize is that although we own the companies together, there is church and state. We do not talk about work at home. We do a little bit if there's, if my marketing person is having a bad day and I just want to say, hey, we should get flowers for this person or something like that. But for the most part, 9 to 5 is 9 to 5. Even if we're working at 7 o'clock at night, at home, we try to stay away from that conversation because the support is really important, but also the ability to separate is, I think, a lot more important. And I think people who have great support systems sometimes interweave that with relationships.
I used to work for my dad as a kid. There was no buffer between me and him as many days. So when my son was working for me, I put a buffer in, and it was really good. And then towards the end, we didn't have a buffer, and of course you could feel it. So because it was work, all conversation. So I think that's such a smart thing. So anybody that works together, make sure you have either a buffer in it or don't talk about it.
And just realize sort of what is about what you're feeling versus what's happening. I think a lot of people who cross that support system where somebody supporting you, you start bringing business into personal, you start fighting, and just a lot of it is you have to know that you're not responsible for another person's feelings. So there's feelings, and then there's business conversations, and they're very separate.
I say to even within our team, I'm facts. Don't talk from feelings, talk about facts. And if you talk about facts, talk about facts, you're okay. So let's talk about some legal gaps and risk. What are some of the legal blind spots you see with agents, investors, or business owners that are overlooked the most, especially when they're moving fast or trying to grow?
I think disclosure is something that we all talk about. Every single realtor that I know says disclosure, disclosure, disclosure. But they're not focusing really on what that means, right? Investors who also have a real estate license, if you don't pull a permit and you don't disclose it, you're not a normal seller. And when I do consults for those kind of cases where somebody calls and they're like, oh, my house is flooding or my house is having this problem, take it from me. My first question is, who was the seller on the property? If they say an LLC, next question is there a disclosure in there that says that they're related to the agent somehow? And if they say yes, my next thing is to look up on Bright. Does it say agent owned? And those three things, I don't care about the rest. Like if you violated Maryland statute on two things and then you violated an advertising rule, I'm already past the threshold of being able to send you a demand letter. So make sure disclose, and really understand what that means. And then the second is set up your estate planning, which is like trusts and wills now, so that if you do end up in a situation later, you're not sacrificing to like save a reputation and all that. Of course, with that being said, work ethically, work good. Don't be the shady agent. We all know who they are. Be good at your job, and that means be good to people and give back as much as you can.
Yes. I was listening to something recently and they were saying the three things people are concerned about the most is, can I trust you? Are you good at what you do? And do you care about me? And I was like, that's so true. And if you live life that way, I was like, wow, amazing the outcome of your relationships and what they'll be.
Yeah. And here's the thing. I'm really good at what I do. But for me, those three questions, the are you good at what you do, always comes last. Like there's people who call me and they're like, hey, Lee said to give you a call. And they don't even care about the rest. They're like, how much does it cost? Lee said you're going to fix it. And that, yes, I could be good at what I'm doing. And that's a portion of it. But being a good person, being honest, being forthright, all that leads into that because your reputation is who you are.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're leading with your core values.
Right.
Of who you are. And it's amazing what comes out of that. Can you think of a time when someone came to you too late and if they have just done one thing, the whole situation could have been avoided?
Oh gosh, I can think of so many. There's been a lot. I think the big thing is that when you first see the pothole, whatever it is, get help then. I think the biggest mistake people make is sometimes thinking they can handle things on their own, not paying for a professional to help them, not going to their real estate broker. And then it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's not everybody's covering things up, but it's the intention of trying to fix it without help. The moment you see a pothole, whatever that might be in your life, realize that you are, in a way, your mind is kind of shaded because it's you. You're in a panic. There's a fight or flight happening, even if it's not a big thing. Have the people in your life that you can ask those questions to right away. Don't wait too late.
Yeah, good. So legal foundations for growth. Why do you think legal structure is so overlooked when businesses are scaling? And what's the cost of that down the line?
I think the idea of a lawyer has always been you call a lawyer when you're in trouble. And I think that's why there's this like wall of not calling lawyers, not getting help. And I think what I'm trying to say is it should be just a yearly checkup, just like with a doctor. Pay the hourly fee, go see there. Like, here's my stuff. Here's what I've done. Here's where I'm going to go. It's going to cost you about $400 to talk to a lawyer for 1 hour. And that's fine. If you hire me for a lawsuit, if you hire me when you're in trouble, I charge $6.95 an hour. And it's 10 hours just to get through your documents.
Right.
And it's huge. People don't realize how huge that is.
It's preparation.
Yeah. Set up your structures, in my world, I think if you're in any business, it doesn't have to be real estate. You should have an LLC or an S Corp or a C Corp, any kind of business entity. And then you should also have a trust for your personal foundation. I don't know, love it or hate it. My kids are in private school, and the way I have myself structured is I don't own my house. I don't own my car. My businesses, it's hard to find who owns them. So if you sue me, it looks like I don't own anything on paper. My kids actually can qualify for tuition assistance with my 7 businesses, and it's all perfectly legal. Just look at somebody to like set your systems up, because if you are client interacting, you're going to piss off a client one day. I always tell people, if you haven't been sued yet, you're not big enough yet. Yeah. It's going to happen.
Yeah, agree. If someone's growing quickly, adding team members, launching a new division, what's one legal move that's non-negotiable in your book?
Put something in writing. I get calls every single day, and I'm just going to pick on your name, but Lee and I had an agreement, and I did all of this, and he said that I would get 30%, but we have nothing in writing. You talk to Lee's going to be like, I never asked him to do that. I said 30% could work if XYZ happened. There is three sides to every single story. So if you are growing, if you are adding, an assistant or a team member or a business partner, put it in writing. You can always edit it later, but don't do this thing of like, I got your back, you got mine. It's a business relationship.
It's too late.
Yeah.
So estate planning and wealth building. You say estate planning is a key part of wealth building. Why should business owners stop waiting and start early?
It's that concept that I said that I don't own much on paper. So any business that I have, you could get sued. And the problem is that if you don't have yourself set up right, meaning that you don't act like a business, you don't have your accounting done right, I can pierce that corporate veil and go after your personal assets for not having things set up right. So you should have a CPA, an accountant, bookkeeper, have all of that set up, and then put your personal stuff in a trust. I just helped a client. He was 50. He played tennis with his kid, got hit on the head, collapsed. His 7-year-old walked home to get his mom. This gentleman did not live. So,
wow.
Yeah. 73 rental properties, all in LLCs, never set up a trust, never set up a will. So prior to his burial, his mother, the mother of the child, was in my office and needed help because he left an estate that was higher than $2 million with no plan. And she said, I don't know how to access our money. I'm not on any of the LLCs. She's like, all the money, the rental income is going into LLCs. And I can't even see them. What do I do? And I was like, well, now we're going to have to do probate. And I ended up charging her 4% of the estate just to get her access to it. And that's massive. And that's the statutory rate here in Maryland. It's not like I gouged her or anything. It's 4%.
Wow.
Yeah.
So just pre-planning. I mean, that ultimately comes to
pre-plan.
I've talked to enough other people that it's like, oh, just put in LLCs, put it in the will. But you're saying with the will too, you're going to have all LLCs are going to have to go through probate. Mm-hmm. Then there's going to be a taxation on that as well.
Correct.
Not that you're a tax planning expert, but
have a trust. That's my advice. And I think we talked a little bit before the podcast started, but with a trust, what you're doing is essentially creating a new entity. And it's not an inheritance anymore. It's a gift for somebody else. So,
okay.
And I'll just quickly walk through what my trust says because it gives you the scope of it. A trust is an entity that I control, but I don't own from the date of creation.
Okay.
It says that my children will inherit it at some point in the future when a triggering life event occurs, such as a lawsuit, death, or incapacity. So now I don't own anything, my trust does. And that's huge because if I pass away, if something happens, there's no probate. My kids just pick up the bag because it was a gift for them anyway. Mm-hmm. The other big portion is that it allows you to control from the grave, for lack of a better word.
Okay, yeah.
My kids, if they inherit everything today, if they're under the age of 21, they're only getting 20%. And it's going to be used for the care of their health, safety, and wellness. 21 to 26, I have that 20% goes from their inheritance will be used for education. You don't want an education? Fine. You're not getting the money at that age frame. Go drink at a bar, go travel Europe, have fun.
Right.
And then 26 to 35, at least my trust says an additional 30% is released to you for the purchase of your primary residence, but you need to qualify for the loan first without my money. So instead of me passing and you getting all this stuff that you don't know what to do with, there's sort of like these guiding blocks along the way. And there's huge tax benefits to it as well.
Very, very interesting.
I've got you sold. I can see
Yes,
it.
I just think, we started scaling some of that for grandkids and so forth. It was like, all right, I don't, if I should pass, have a heart attack or whatever it may be and die, tomorrow, then I don't want, this massive amount of money to go to them that they have no idea what to do with. So I think that, structuring it in a better way is much better off. There's
also my oldest child, he's only 7, but he's diagnosed with a couple of things that life could lead either way for him. You Google him, you Google the diagnosis, he could be Steve Jobs. He could also be living in my basement at the age of 30. And that's going to be on him and how, we structure life and where he ends up. But here's the thing, if he's got the need for Social Security income or he needs to be on Medicaid or he needs, any sort of assistance throughout his life, if I pass away and he gets all that money, I've instantly disqualified him from services he needs. You put in a trust, you basically state, this will supplement your income after those benefits kick in.
Okay.
And it gives instructions for other people on how to care for them. And that's huge. And that's just a couple of steps.
Most of us don't think about it that way, right? And none of us want to think of the morbid of like, oh, if I pass away, then what? But at some point you have to.
Right.
I think of people purchasing new homes. One of the things we talk about a lot, I do anyway, and is life estates.
Mm-hmm.
So do you recommend a life estate for somebody's for their personal property and so forth, for their, say they have a couple kids and so forth, that are teenage or whatever age.
So life estates pretty much are like a trust, but they only deal with the houses. And what it says is, I'll just use my name for an example. While I'm alive, while Diana's alive, the house belongs to her. Whatever's left of the house after I pass will go to her kids. So it's just like a trust. It's much more affordable. I strongly recommend it for most people, especially as you age, because for Medicaid planning purposes, the IRS looks back 5 years on what you own.
Okay.
If you put in a life estate, it now belongs to your kids after you pass, and it doesn't count towards your income asset evaluation, which is huge.
Good. So you would recommend it overall?
100%.
Yeah. Because we had somebody we recommended it to, and they didn't do it. And all of a sudden, the guy suddenly passed 2 years later, and it was actually his girlfriend. Mm-hmm. So now she's got that's going to the estate, and
16% taxes and capital gains and all of that.
Versus, a few $100 to put it in a life estate, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're minimal money.
I had a client who called me, and his mom had passed, and he said she died without a will. I'm like, okay.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and I was like, well, you're her son. So he's like, no, you don't understand. My mom was still married, and she left my dad 15 years ago. They haven't spoken. Oh. And I was like, okay. And I was like, well, your dad gets everything. And she's like, why? And I'm like, well, if you die without a will, without a plan, the state says who gets it. And if you're over the age of 18, it'll be your dad. And he, grown man, cried on the phone. He's like, I will do anything for him not to get it. Like, they had a really tenuous relationship. And I was like, there's nothing you can do unless he agrees to not take it. Like, the opportunity to set those things up are prior to death.
Yeah. And you got to think about life insurance. I had another friend that he divorced, and they didn't change his beneficiary. Yep. Should have went to his kids, and ended up going to the ex-wife.
That happens a lot.
Yeah. So just simple things I hope people are listening to, that, hey, check your beneficiary on your bank accounts, your life insurance, your 401k. All these things are super important. My wife's uncle just passed away, and she's going through like all the records. So I'd say
much
of having some kind of, do you recommend like for people to have some kind of simple form of like, hey, here are our assets, so the other spouse knows? Is that something you do with your estate planning as well?
100%. So going back to when my mom was sick, it was unexpected. It was like one day she was fine, the next day she wasn't. And I had to pay her bills. It was like, she's going to pass. Okay, she didn't. And then it was like a month passed. Now her mortgage is due. Her bank accounts are due. And if you want to rob me, I have a nice little spreadsheet in my laptop called Passwords. Not my mom.
Yeah.
It took me 6 weeks to maneuver like where her bills were coming from. I had to go to her house, open her mail. Like, my dad had no clue what to do. I had no affiliation with Medicare and Medicaid, and I had to learn how to maneuver that. And if you don't have that set up for somebody, you're just kind of leaving them in the dark.
How about long-term care? You recommend it, don't recommend it as like short-term, long-term?
If you don't have a trust, 100%. Because the statistics, at least in Maryland right now, is you have to get at least 7 hours of care if you need care at home. It's between $40 to $50 an hour. That's per day that you have to get care to qualify. And that's coming out of pocket. If you need long-term care in a facility, in some parts of Baltimore City that I probably wouldn't be comfortable parking in, it's $2,500 to share a room with somebody.
Wow.
In Howard County, it's $7,000 to $8,000 a month. Those numbers are staggering.
Yeah. Well, I think that, and we work all our life to save money, and then all of a sudden you need it when we're later in life.
100%.
So that's all I wanted to ask. Some of the things that I've seen a lot of people not think about. I know when I did my life insurance, there was a way to build it and wrap it in our life insurances as well. We use Northwestern Mutual. It's not a plug, but I just think of some of the ones that were super helpful for me. Anything else you recommend with that?
I just know what it is. I tell people the greeting card seasons is when you need to evaluate your stuff. And what I mean by that is, it's not every birthday, but if you're going to go to Target and you're going to buy a wedding gift for somebody you love that's close to your family, and you're getting them a nice greeting card, think about where your affairs are. How does this fit in? If your older child just married or maybe got divorced, do we need to reevaluate your life insurance, your policies, all of that? If you have a diagnosis, your child turns 21, very different than a child at 16. And anytime you're kind of walking through Target, getting a huge gift for somebody that's somebody you love, reconsider how your business structure and your life structure is set up.
Okay. And say it's somebody that doesn't have a ton, like they own a house, they have a car, they have a few things, but they don't have any rental properties and they don't have investments. Is there anything particular that you tell them, like, hey, here's our simple list of being prepared for the inevitable time? We all have a born date and an end date, right? So it's a matter of, what do you prepare yourself for?
Simple will, and you don't really have to hire a lawyer for it. Some lawyer's going to kill me for saying that. In Maryland, it just has to be, who gets your stuff has to be witnessed by 2 people and your signature at the bottom.
Okay.
It could be very simple, 1 page. A power of attorney and advance directive, both of which are free on Maryland's website. You just Google it. That's pretty much it. If you have a home, though, either a trust or a life estate, I cannot stress this enough. I didn't grow up in the United States, and I think it's just insane once we hit above 65 how quickly people go through money, and I think people don't conceptualize the cost of caring for yourself. And as somebody who's walked through some of these nursing homes and therapy centers and rehabilitation centers, like, it's bad.
I can tell you, well, that my wife has some autoimmune diseases, and just a lot of the stuff that's not covered by insurance, and the amount of money that we're putting at that, trying to get her some kind of relief and quality of life, it's so expensive. And I can't, so it's just getting people prepared more than anything else.
Right.
And that's what I want them to hear is like, all right, way more expensive than you think. You save all your life for it. And then how do you protect yourself and your loved ones? Because you don't want to drain it all before you go either. So
I have an autoimmune thing too, and I got diagnosed when I was 8. And I never knew that I would have such a hard time with life insurance and these things that you don't think about, right? One thing I learned is that if I get my kids life insurance before the age of 18, they could be seasoned into that policy above the age of 18. So because I have an autoimmune disorder that's genetic, my kids might likely have it. All I did was get a policy for them that's pretty affordable until the age of 18 that they could choose to renew. And my parents didn't have the concept to do that. And now at the age of 35, as one of the primary breadwinners for my family, shopping life insurance policies for me is, am I buying?
I can't get it for my wife.
Right. I'll give you some advice on that. I spoke to somebody about it.
Okay. Yeah. So, my mom's 76. I could get long-term care and health or life insurance for her, but I couldn't get it for my wife. It's, was 48 at the time.
It's insane.
So, but I think just getting people prepared. Nobody loves having the estate planning conversations, but if you don't start thinking about it, it's too soon. It's too late. More than anything else. So just trying to get them. So you had mentioned the Maryland website. What would they Google or put in?
Just put in Maryland statutory power of attorney, statutory advance directive. They're literally free. I think sometimes lawyers just charge you for it, but there's a sample will, there's a sample power of attorney, there's a sample, advance directive. I don't think you should hire a lawyer because it's minimally expensive for a will. If you just want somebody to take care of it, make sure it's 100% accurate. But if you're not within the financial means to do that, there's lots of resources for you to have it.
Right. Good. Anything that we didn't cover today that we should?
No, I think you got it pretty well. If anybody wants to talk more, I'm insane, so I give my cell phone number. This is my actual cell phone number. It's 443-739-6724. You could shoot me a text, and I will respond.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for today. It was great information, and hopefully everybody got a lot out of it. I know I did still.
Awesome.
So thank you so much.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
All right, thanks for watching, everybody.